right. So welcome to this year's 5th annual Low Carbon Emissions Steering Committee meeting. A little housekeeping. Everybody is going to be muted as they log in, and if anybody has any questions, just raise your hand by clicking the icon next to your name in the participant window, or just ask your question in the chat menu or in the chat window, and we'll do our best to make sure that we don't miss any questions and answer as many as possible. Go ahead and sign in by dropping your name and agency into the chat window. And if you haven't already downloaded it, you can get a copy of the integrated report handout that we'll be talking about in a minute from the file transfer window. And again, if you are unable to get that file from the file transfer window, drop your email into the chat and I will email it to you here in just in a minute. As always, I'm going to be posting a video of this meeting to our YouTube channel. So if there's anybody that needed to see this meeting and wasn't able to make it, they can watch the video on our playlist over there on YouTube. So I'm going to just give a quick background on the program. It was established in 1991 and is administered by TCEQ, who then contracts with the Basin planning agencies to administer the program throughout the state. Our TCEQ project manager is Kieran Freeman, and he's located down in Austin. Within TRA, we are part of the Technical Services and Basin Planning Department, which handles the GIS, environmental services, and water resources planning for the authority. The Clean Rivers Department falls within the environmental services portion, but we also do other projects and activities outside of Clean Rivers. So we frequently work with other departments at TRA and other state agencies. So moving into the presentations, first up, we have Webb and Ryan, who are going to be discussing the CCAA activities in the Basin.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Webb Mangum. I work here in Technical Services and Basin Planning with Angela and the rest of the crew. I'm going to give you an update on our CCAA that we've negotiated with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So what is the CCAA? It's a candidate conservation agreement with assurances. Now, we've talked to y'all about this the last several meetings because this has been quite a long and arduous process. A CCAA is an enhancement of survival permit through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Currently, it's for non-listed species. So if you have a threatened or endangered species in your basin, you can't use a CCAA. Basically, with the CCAA, you trade voluntary conservation measures for incidental take protections during your normal operations. It's really designed for landowners, but we've used it because water rights in Texas are considered property rights. We've been able to use the CCAA vehicle for incidental take protections. If the species ever becomes listed, it converts to an incidental take permit. So when you get your CCAA, it comes with a enhancement of survival permit. If that species is ever listed, it will automatically convert into your ITP. The difference between what's usually done as a habitat conservation plan, an HCP, it requires you to have mitigation for all of your take. Whereas with a net conservation benefit, you're required to have, or with the CCAA, you're required to provide net conservation benefit. It's not just a one-for-one like mitigation would be. Next slide, right? So the listing process. The listing process seems really simple, but it's actually quite arduous and takes quite a long time. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service gets a petition. In the case of the mussels that we're looking at, this was through a Wild Earth Guardians lawsuit back in 2011, I think is when that started. So after a species is petitioned, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has 90 days to review to determine whether or not it's warranted to look at. It would be a positive finding, or if it's a negative finding, that it's not warranted. After 90 days, they publish their finding, and then it's time for the review process and public comment. After that, it goes into a status review, and you get a 12-month finding, if it's warranted or not warranted. If it's warranted, then you get a proposed rule. That rule has 12 months of public comment, and the Fish and Wildlife Service reviews that again. That's available again for public comment, and then after a year, you have a final rule. So that 30 days after that final rule, it becomes in the Federal Register. So that should be about a 1.5 year process. So for us, the process started in 2008. that year and a half process came to fruition this February. So our 90-day finding was in 2019. The status and peer review started in 2009. The status and peer review started in 2019. And that's been spinning around as we've been working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on negotiating this agreement. And this slide needs to be updated to February 1st is when we actually got our permit. And we got our permit. TRA holds the permit, but North Texas Municipal Water District, Tarrant Regional Water District, Dallas, and Fort Worth are all included as certificates of inclusion. So they are required to do the same conservation measures that we've agreed to. In return, they will enjoy the same incidental take protections. Next slide, thank you. So in 2015, we got the heads up of what was coming on from the Comptroller's office. In 2018, we began negotiations with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. 2019, we brought in the compact in Tarrant Regional Water District, and we submitted our first draft in 2021. And 3 years later, we end up with an approved permit. So it's been quite a process. Next, this is a picture of the document. It's available on our website under, I believe it's under Basin Planning. If I'm wrong, Ryan, correct me when you get to your part of the presentation. Next slide, please. So what are the threats that these species face in our basin? The species that we're concerned about are 4 species of freshwater mussels and 2 species of turtle. That's alligator snapping turtle and western chicken turtle. So the threats in our basin are altered hydrology, water quality from wastewater treatment, and also non-point source runoff, degraded habitat, barriers to dispersal, which are the dams and some of the lock-in dams on the main stem and our major dams on our major reservoirs. Direct mortality from overutilization. People use those for fishing bait. And then also for, as the scientific communities will say, there's so many studies on these freshwater mussels that will love them to death. Climate change and invasive species like zebra mussels. Next. And so what are the covered activities that we need to continue to be able to do? So the compact and Tarrant Regional Water District, we do conservation activities, our biological monitoring, that could be a threat to the species, or that's a covered activity because it's a threat to the species. Our water supply reservoirs, operations of our dams and bulkheads, operations of our wastewater treatment plants, pipelines, maintenance of those pipelines, invasive aquatic plant control for invasive species, and boat, dock, and pier permitting on our reservoirs. So the conservation measures, I'm not going to go through all of these, but basically these kind of give you an idea of what we've agreed to do to help the species. So these are things that we do, some of it we do already, and some of it are things we do above and beyond what are required by our normal operations, and that's what gives us that net conservation benefit. And so how do we take care of these threats and these conservation measures? So what we did is we created a 10-year work plan. This is a 10-year agreement between us and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We've agreed to give an annual report, a biennial operations review, which is as we learn more about these species, we'll get together with the covered parties, the compact and Tarrant Water District twice or once every 2 years and discuss, are there any operations that we can do or any changes to our operations that we can make that will help benefit these species. We'll identify and review CPAs. Those are conservation priority areas. So when we look at doing restoration and habitat enhancement, are we doing these in the right location where these species really can survive? I guess it's not crazy to say we shouldn't put a whole lot of effort into the Dallas-Fort Worth floodway, because no matter what we do, those things are always going to have issues in that area, and we can focus our efforts down more in the middle basin. We're going to spend $50,000 of this 10-year contract on public education and outreach, $100,000 on a cage mussel study, which is kicking off. Ryan's going to talk about that now. We're actually about to sign an ILA with AgriLife to start that study. Long-term monitoring. We're going to follow these species long-term to make sure that we're understanding what the status of them are in the Trinity Basin. Some water quality modeling in years 2, 3, and 4. Some H&H modeling in years 3 and 4. non-point source protection, which is our watershed protection plans, and some stream bank restoration. So the project is kind of front end loaded with studies and research, and back end loaded with actually trying to get some implementation on the ground of some long term stream restoration measures. And the total project cost for all of us is $750,000, and that is $750,000 of new money over the next 10 years. And that doesn't count all of the in-kind salary and et cetera, travel costs, all the work that we're going to do. That's just kind of hard costs that we're agreeing to provide. And I believe now is the time I will pass this off to Ryan to give you a little bit more detail on the covered species and talk a little bit more about the detail of the plans. So, and I'll be on here. So if you have questions for me at the end of the presentation, I'll be happy to answer those then. Thank you.
Thank you, Webb. For everyone who doesn't know me, my name is Ryan Seymour. I'm an environmental scientist here at TRA. So like Webb said, I'm just going to go into the plan a little bit more in depth, really highlighting our covered species first. So like he explained, we have 4 freshwater mussel species: Texas heel splitter, Trinity pigtoe, Texas fongsfoot, and Louisiana pigtoe, along with our 2 turtle species. So just going in here first and looking at just the occupied habitat of these freshwater mussel species throughout the Trinity. Really, they fall on the main stem Trinity. So main stem starts here through the DFW Metroplex, that Fort Worth into Arlington, over into Dallas, and then goes all the way down into Lake Livingston, and then farther down into the Gulf. So for our freshwater mussel species, Texas heel splitters range, as you can see, is throughout both the upper and lower part of the main stem. Trinity pigtoes range throughout the central DFW area, and then throughout the actual portion of the main stem here, Middle Basin, we can find all these species occurring. So starting out with Texas heel splitter, just to give you a little background, all this information was pulled from Mussels of Texas. So it's an elliptical to oblong oval freshwater mussel with a very thin, brittle shell. If you do find these out there, they're traditionally going to be dark brown, but in the Trinity, especially up around the Dallas area, sometimes they appear tan. They prefer the medium to large streams and rivers and the real soft substrate. They do have a known host fish, which might help us out moving forward with this study through the last like 5 to 10 years when we're starting to look at restoration activities. That host fish of freshwater drum might become a focal species for this project. That's still yet to be decided. And then for a status right now, like we've mentioned before, it is state threatened, but is proposed endangered at the federal level, thus why we have the CCAA. So Texas fongsfoot, on the other hand, I'm sorry for putting on this photo. I need to put in something for reference because this is actually a very, very small mussel compared to the heel splitter that we had before. This photo just makes it look large because it's zoomed in. So elliptical, thin and very compressed, but it has these great rays going down it, sometimes appearing like chevrons. Once again, habitat found in large rivers, but likes that protected nearshore area. Right now, we don't know a host fish. Various researchers, including Aggie Life, are going through and trying to determine this. They're guessing it might be freshwater drum, but it has not officially been named as a host fish for this species yet. For Texas fongsfoot, once again, state threatened, but for the federal level, it's proposed threatened. Now we got our 2 pigtoe species in here, the Trinity and the Louisiana pigtoe. Trinity, just like the name, found in the Trinity Basin, subtriangular, as you can see, a little bit different than the more triangular in total body for the Louisiana pigtoe, but as you know, mussels can not follow their own rules on how they look with their morphology sometimes. In terms of habitat for the Trinity pigtoe, streams and rivers, they like the main channel, but they're actually not very picky, so you'll sometimes see them off on the side channel. Regarding host fish, there's really no known host fish species, but there's a bunch of Cyprinidae type species, your minnows here, that are suggested to be for the Trinity pigtoe. So state threatened, and there is actually no federal proposed listing for it right now. But because Trinity Pigtoe, Trinity River Basin, we added into the CCAA. Louisiana pigtoe is an interesting one. It's actually not found within the Trinity Basin anymore, but the very first specimen of Louisiana pigtoe was found in the Upper Trinity Basin years ago, and it's the one in the Smithsonian. So it was added in as a mussel species that we know used to be in the Trinity. It could potentially come back. That is a possibility. So we include it in the CCA just so that way, if it ever does return into the Trinity, one, we're covered, but two, it helps just inform research. So once again, streams and rivers for the habitat, slow to moderate currents for the Louisiana pigtoe. It does have a known host fish, which is the blacktail shiner, one of my favorites out there, and is a state threatened but federally proposed threatened. So those were the mussels. Looking at our two turtle species, we have the western chicken turtle and the alligator snapping turtle. Just looking at the range here within Texas, starting with alligator snapper, it actually has a very broad range throughout the entire southeast, but is found in the eastern portion of the state of Texas. So where this is most likely going to affect our middle Trinity Basin to lower Trinity, it still can potentially be found in the upper Trinity Basin. Western chicken turtle, on the other hand, is a very understudied species. There's a lot of work going on right now regarding this species, so the actual range of this species within the state of Texas is not really well known. So I had to pull the most recent range map from some of the research coming out of regarding western chicken turtle to show that this is the potential range with modeled high occurrence occurring in red, and pretty much a 50-50 chance of we think it could be here because of habitat, but maybe not in green. So as you can see, once again, East Texas heavy, along the Gulf Coast heavy for this species, but that's just because that's where the work's been done so far. As they're expanding out, once they know where these turtles are, that range map is probably going to change throughout the next 10 years, and hopefully some of the work we're doing in the Trinity can help that range map grow and or be better defined. So here are just these two species. Same thing I did with the mussels, just looking at some characteristics. For the western chicken turtle, it has a smooth, hard shell with nice rings defined, and it is the only turtle species in the state of Texas with nice yellow bars on its front legs that extend the entirety of the front leg. So for habitat, it's a very unique species. One of the reasons it's hard to develop a range map for it, because it basks on the terrestrial surface and sometimes in wetlands and marshes between February and July. But throughout the rest of the year, it buries itself in the ground by estivating and is just in the ground. So for most of the year, this turtle is just in the ground. You don't know it's there. You're going to walk right over it. You have no clue it's below your feet. So trying to do research, there's a very tight research window to really understand where this turtle is within the state. Like I said, range East Texas, state threatened, and it's currently federally petitioned for listing. They're looking at, should it be threatened, should it be endangered. They just, as I've said, don't have a bunch of research on it, so they're trying to determine that. Alligator snapping turtle, on the other hand, is that big name species that a lot of people know. It is hunted in some other states, not within the state of Texas. Large, broad head, very spiked shell, which makes it distinct from just a common snapping turtle. Habitat, calm, deep waters, back oxbows, range, once again, all the major East Texas basins. So Trinity, Natchez, all those. Looking at status, state threatened and federally proposed. So as Webb mentioned earlier, we have these conservation measures that we will be going through with the CCAA. It is required to provide that net conservation benefit. And as I go through some of these later in the talk, just a reminder, these are recommendations from a whole host of people, various resource managers at the state, federal, and local level, various researchers throughout the state, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Texas Parks and Wildlife species experts, and also very common published best management practices for these species. So a lot of work was put into these conservation measures So it's not just something we just check as a box. It is something that will provide this net conservation benefit. When we're actually looking at various conservation zones that we'll be focusing on, we divide the basin into 5 areas. So Conservation Zone A is the Upper Trinity Basin, pretty much above all major reservoirs of the DFW area. Conservation Zone B is the DFW Metroplex area where multiple of the forks come together. Conservation Measure C is this Middle Basin main stem area, which is more rural than the DFW Metroplex. D is Lake Livingston and all its tributaries, and then E is the tidal Trinity zone below Lake Livingston. So as this map showed before, you see various mussel habitats in there, the occupied zones, and this overlaps well with the turtle habitats. So once again, not going to go through all these one by one, but just going to have these slides here. So if you want to go back and read them, look at the CCA, you can see we have various conservation measures on large scale level, small scale, operational, ecological to help us out. Second set here, and then the monitoring and research, which Webb hit on just a little bit before. So not going to go through all 14, but I will highlight a few that do overlap with the Clean Rivers program and the work we're already doing. First off is Conservation Measure 8.1, non-point source watershed protection. You'll hear later in the talk about some of the watershed protection plans within the Trinity by TRA staff. They'll discuss just project updates for that, so I won't go into too much depth, but various covered parties throughout the Trinity River Basin and who are part of this CCAA already have active watershed protection plan projects, including Village Creek and Lake Worth for TRA, Joe Pool Lake, North Texas Municipal Water, Lake Lavon, Boys to Arc Lake, and then Tarrant Regional Water District with Eagle Mountain, Cedar Creek, and Richland Chambers. So moving forward with this CCA over the next 10 years, we're going to continue implementing these existing watershed protection plans. We'll be seeking new ones, and then we're going to work to develop a watershed prioritization tool to help us figure out where new watershed protection plans can go within the Trinity. So that'll be coming in that later portion of the agreement. 8.11, public education and outreach. All the covered parties already do a great job with public education and outreach. So this is one of those, we're committed to it. We're going to continue to do this, multiple age groups, multiple levels throughout the entire basin. So that's just highlighting that this is something we already do. We feel good in our methods, and we're going to continue to do this. But also following within this public education outreach is an alligator snapping turtle signage project that's been started and is going to expand with the CCA. So Tarrant Regional, Trinity River, and North Texas Municipal have agreed and purchased multiple alligator snapping turtle signs to help determine a range of this species within the Trinity. So these signs are up at several reservoirs throughout the basin. Currently, we have 40. We're expected to go up to 80 signs by 2026. And this signage is great because it has a nice little QR code here that people, if they're out, can take this, save this in their phone, and then if they do see an alligator snapping turtle, they can report it to us, putting just basic descriptions of where you're at, approximate time, life stage, adult, juvenile, providing a contact for us, and then you select the location on the map. So that's the public side of this form. On the back side, here at the Trinity River Authority, we're working with Parks and Wildlife and other river authorities throughout East Texas, and we can see where these locations are being placed. These sightings determine if it is an alligator snapping turtle or if it is a common snapping turtle, and then that helps us determine the range map for this species throughout Texas. So 8.14, monitoring and research. So as Webb hit on before, these projects were designed to provide data and information for the research community. We really wanted to provide a benefit to multiple people at multiple levels, state, local, and federal agencies, along with academia for this. So what we're agreeing to over the next 10 years are just those multiple research projects. We're going to come together every 2 years for a research review meeting, pretty much focus on, hey, what did we find over the past 2 years and how can we improve our operations? And then looking at a potential reintroduction effort if that does come down to it. That will be decided by U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Parks and Wildlife, but if it does, all the covered parties have committed to help out with that effort if it comes to it. So, Clean Rivers Program, here we go. 8.14.1, in-stream water quality monitoring. Pretty much, we already participate in Clean Rivers Program. We're going to continue to do that. It's real nice because 78% or 199 of the stations sampled within the Trinity are by the covered parties for this CCA. So we'll continue that. We'll continue writing and reviewing the integrated and basin highlight summary reports. And then, like I said, relocation in there if needed based off some of the information we're getting from this water quality monitoring. Point 2 here, a cage mussel study, which was also alluded to before, kicking off right now, which is awesome. So it's a partnership between Texas Parks and Wildlife, Texas A&M Aggie Life, and TRA. TRA a few years ago applied for a state wildlife grant through Texas Parks and Wildlife to do a cage mussel study on the main stem Trinity, pretty much to determine where water quality can support freshwater mussels south of the DFW Metroplex. We realized at the end of contract negotiations that it'd be easier to just award the state wildlife grant to Aggie Life and then come on as a project partner. So that's what's happening. So the grant went to Aggie Life, and it's all three, 2 agencies and 1 academic institution together doing this study. So for the approach, we're going to expose juvenile mussels in ambient conditions of the Trinity for a year. These sites are going to be in zone B and C, so in that Metroplex area, and then in that middle basin as dilution starts to take some of the pollution out of the system. We'll examine the growth and survival at various sites and then compare it to monthly water quality sampling to try and determine if there are zones that we can support freshwater mussels throughout the Trinity. So all these conservation measures, like we mentioned before, are going to provide the net conservation benefit. It's a 10-year study. It's just kicking off. So it's one where we hope to come back each year here and give you a nice little update about all this. Once again, our resources are online. The Trinity River CCA document can be found on Fish and Wildlife's website along with ours, and our focus on the endangered species, both freshwater mussels and turtles, can be found on the TRA website. So with that, are there any questions?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So next up, we're going to talk about the Joe Pool Lake and Village Creek Lake Arlington Watershed Protection Plan implementation updates. Heather is at a conference today, so I'm going to be tag teaming with Caleb from our communications department to give an update on our watershed protection implementation plans. So first we're going to go over the Joe Pool Lake Watershed Protection Plan funding. Come on, work for me here. Funding for this project was provided by TCEQ through the Clean Waters Act, Section 319H from EPA, with local match funding from the TRA and the cities of Cedar Hill, Grand Prairie, Mansfield, and Midlothian. The impetus for this project stemmed from the 2014 Texas Integrated Report, which found an impairment for E. coli in Walnut Creek and a concern for nutrients or for nitrate in the Mountain Creek arm of Joe Pool Lake. So the Walnut Creek exceedance was a 195.6 mpn per 100 mils, and that exceeded the criterion of 126 mpn per 100 mils for E. coli. For the nitrate screening level, it exceeded the 0.37 screening level at 0.74 milligrams per liter. Okay, the goals of this project include protecting the water quality in Joe Pool Lake and its tributaries, as well as improving water quality by addressing the nitrate concern in the lake and the bacteria impairment in Walnut Creek. As of 2018, the impairment for E. coli in Walnut Creek had been delisted. However, in the more recent 2022 and the draft 2024 integrated reports, a concern was found based on limited data. The concern for nitrate has also been removed from the Walnut Creek arm of the lake. Okay, So here's a map of the relative severity of E. coli loads from all sources by subwatershed. And so these sources can include everything from pets, livestock, wildlife, wastewater, etc. This is all detailed in the Watershed Protection Plan document that you can find on our website. So overall, impacts from all combined E. coli sources appeared to be most prevalent in the smaller subwatersheds surrounding the reservoir, especially to the west. And these watersheds are mostly urban areas, with the predominant E. coli loadings being attributed to pet waste. So although the western subwatersheds on Walnut Creek had high loadings from deer and livestock, the values for these loadings were well below the 126 MPN per acre day allowable loading. And so they didn't have a large contribution to the total loading from all sources. OSSFs also supplied high to moderate loads in the south, and wastewater treatment facilities contributed to the overall E. coli loading only in the regions where they were located. So again, the detailed report for this can be found on our website. I believe if you go to our website and then there's a basin planning tab, that will lead you to where the watershed protection plans are located. All right, the Joe Pool Lake Watershed Protection Plan was submitted to EPA in August of 22, and it was accepted by EPA in October of 2022. So it's now eligible for Clean Waters Act Section 319 funding for the watershed implementation projects that were outlined within the plan. So all the work that goes into developing the watershed protection plan basically boils down to this one page here. So it identifies several management measures that would reduce the bacteria levels in the watershed. And this was all discussed with stakeholders and input from them as well. The overall anticipated load reduction for E. coli provided by these management measures is about 3.4 quadrillion MPN per year, which exceeds the needed reductions of 2.4 quadrillion MPN per year. And then the anticipated nutrient load reductions are 18.6 tons per year. So since the acceptance of the Watershed Protection Plan, an interlocal agreement has been put into place to fund watershed implementation projects. To implement the pollution reduction strategies identified in the Watershed Protection Plan, the partners agreed that a regular shared funding mechanism was needed. So whenever possible, these funds will be used as match funds for federal grant dollars targeted to these programs, usually at a 60% for federal and 40% local match split. So each of the partners is contributing $10,000 a year for 5 years, which results in a total of $250,000 available as match funds. So $50,000 of that would come from TRA, and the remaining $200,000 would come from the other 4 partners. All right, moving on to the Village Creek Lake Arlington Watershed Protection Plan. This one was approved by EPA in 2019, so it is also eligible for 319 funds for implementation. As a refresher, the Lake Arlington borders Fort Worth on the west side and Arlington on the east side. It provides drinking water and recreation activities. The area is rapidly developing, and then there were concerns for nitrate and chlorophyll A found within the reservoir. Village Creek and its associated tributaries flow north into Lake Arlington, and Village Creek itself is impaired for E. coli. So multiple municipalities and local authorities were involved in the development of this watershed protection plan. And as with the Joe Pool one, this one can be found, this WPP can be found on our website as well. Okay, TRA, with the support of Tarrant Regional Water District, UPSPIRE, the UTA Office of Sustainability, and the City of Fort Worth, applied for a litter abatement grant through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, 5-Star, and Urban Waters Restoration Program. This grant was awarded in fall of 2021 with the goal of removing up to 1,332 pounds of trash per month. It funded the purchase, installation, and maintenance of these trash barriers you see here in the picture at highly visible and heavily littered locations within the Village Creek Lake Arlington watershed and the Fort Worth parks. It aided in the expansion of the UPSPIRE Waterways Litter Prevention Program and has increased community engagement. and so far restored over 21,000 acres of the Village Creek Lake Arlington watershed and 807 acres within the city of Fort Worth. So these barriers are just a floating barrier across here it's got a little net down here that catches floatable trash going down the river or the stream. All right, so this project kicked off in 2022, in February of 22, and concluded in July of 23. We had 10 locations throughout Fort Worth, as shown on this map. And then TRA conducted a monthly litter survey, and then Upspire visited and cleaned the sites every 2 weeks or within 3 days after a rain event. And since the conclusion of the grant project itself, the city of Fort Worth has taken over the project and ownership of the water goods. So they'll be keeping an eye on these and cleaning them out moving forward. So here's just a little overview of how much litter had been picked up as of March 8th of this year. Over 17,000 pounds of trash had been collected at all 10 sites. And so you can see here in this blue bar here, Wildcat Branch was the site that had the largest amount of trash removed overall. All right, and now we have an OSSF grant project in these two watersheds, which started September 1st, 2023, and it's projected to end August 31st of 2026. So TRA is going to be working with the counties and cities to develop a database of all the permitted and unpermitted OSSFs within these two watersheds. And then we're contracting with the A&M AgriLife Research for this grant. So TRA is going to be working with the North Central Texas Council of Governments and the counties to develop an OSSF ranking criteria, a repair and replacement program application, and inspect, repair, and or replace up to 10 failing OSSFs within these two watersheds. And then TRA is also going to be hosting educational programs regarding the proper maintenance of these OSSFs within the watershed. So the funding for this project is about $286,000 in federal funds. So that's the 60%, with a 40% of $191,000 in match, which is including the in-kind contributions from TRA and A&M. So the total project budget is $477,000. All right, so Caleb is going to be talking about the solid waste grant that we received in January of this year to address the litter and illegal dumping. And Caleb, if you will just let me know when you want me to advance the slide, I will do that for you.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. My name is Caleb Naylor. I'm the Outreach and Communications Associate for TRA. And like Angela said, I'll be talking about the TRA Litter and Illegal Dumping Initiative. TRA began pursuing this grant in May of 2022 to support the Joe Pool Lake and Village Creek Lake Arlington watershed protection plans. And we're going to be focusing on the illegal dumping and litter accumulation management measures. The interlocal agreement was signed and executed this month, so we are good to proceed. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So this project is going to allow us to target litter and illegal dumping in both watersheds. We're going to increase the use of the litter source assessment survey and actively engage our stakeholders and residents in the area with better data, education, and cleanup events. So the main funding in this grant is going to be going towards procuring a trailer that's going to be custom fit and equipped with litter cleanup materials and volunteer support items. We're also going to have funds going towards signage, barriers, and education materials to limit illegal dumping. So in order to engage residents in those watersheds, we're going to be hosting multiple litter cleanups, the location of which will be determined from data from the litter source assessment survey and input from our partners. We're also going to be supporting cleanups put on by other organizations and participating in outreach and education events to highlight the issue of litter and illegal dumping, while giving people the opportunity to be a part of the solution to those problems by volunteering at cleanups and spreading our educational material. We have a lot of connections with schools in the area, so we're looking at sourcing volunteers from there, as well as having classroom material so that we're actually getting into the hands of students. But this grant is a reimbursement grant via the North Central Texas Council of Governments. with funding received by the TCEQ as part of their solid waste grants. We're going to be receiving $33,450 to support this program, its events, and all of its material. And the interlocal agreement for this grant was signed and executed this month, with activities for this program lasting until April of 2025 and a final report coming in September of next year. We did receive a lot of letters of support when we were applying for this grant. And we just want to say thank you for that support and how helpful it's going to be to have widespread activities in both of these watersheds. If you have any questions on this, you can reach out to Heather Fern or myself. And that's all I have on that.
All right, thank you, Caleb. Does anybody have any questions so far? If you do have any questions for either Heather or Caleb, just drop them in the chat and I'll make sure that they get them. I believe, Caleb, I thought you had another meeting you had to run off to, so I will pass on any questions to you if I receive any, okay?
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right. All right, so next up, we're going to go over the draft TCEQ 2024 integrated report. So this is just going to be a high-level review of their biennial assessment of water quality. So the period of record for this, they assess a 7-year period of record, but they can also go back an additional 3 years if they need to in order to get the minimum number of samples needed for assessment. So this 2024 integrated report covers 2015 to 22, and then each assessment cycle, going forward or backwards, the assessment cycle, the period is rolled forward 2 more years. And again, if you haven't already downloaded it, this summary is available in the file transfer, or email me or drop it in the chat and I will email it to you. So I've created this handout so you could digest it at your leisure. There's quite a bit of information in here and it's impossible to go over quickly. But so here's the handout slide, or the pages in the handout has 4 tabs. This first tab is the definition tab. So this explains what's in each one of the columns in the next tab. And then also it defines any of the abbreviations that they use in that report. The next tab is the detail from the integrated report. So I've just converted this to Excel so that it's in a filterable format. So if you're interested in a specific water body or in a specific parameter, you can just click on here and filter down for which which segment you're interested in or which parameter you're interested in. And then it provides all the detail for that. Okay. Now the next tab is a summary of that detail tab. And so basically what I've done here is I've just summarized everything down to, I don't know a better way to say this, but either the best or the worst finding for that classified use and that assessment unit. So for example, here for chlorophyll A, there's multiple parameters that are assessed for general uses. Only chlorophyll A had concern. All the other parameters that they assessed were either fully supporting or no concern. So this doesn't give you that level of detail. It's just a more visual way to see this data. And then again, to even summarize it down a little bit more, I've dropped these into maps here. So I've just color coded each of the segments of watersheds to match the color coding that was on this tab here. All right, so before we go further here, I'm just going to give a quick little summary of segments and assessment units that I was just talking about. So classified segments are the water bodies that are defined in Appendix A of the Texas Surface Water Quality Standards. So these are generally major streams, rivers, reservoirs, and there's 41 of them in the Trinity River Basin. So in this example here, segment 0806 is the West Fork Trinity River below Lake Worth, and 0841 is the lower West Fork, okay? Then we have unclassified segments. Now these are not defined by Appendix A, but TCEQ defines these as they receive data on these individual streams. So as we collect data, if we collect it on a new stream, eventually they're going to have enough data to assess, and they will define a new unclassified segment. So these are indicated by the segment number that they flow into, followed by a letter suffix. Okay. There's currently 137 of these in our basin. So that's 178 segments, either classified or unclassified, in our basin. And then segments, both unclassified and classified, can be further broken down into assessment units. And this is what TCEQ bases their integrated report on. So these are smaller portions of the segment where water quality could be assumed to be similar, and they could be bounded by things like tributary confluences, low water dams, or even distances. Individual assessment units have a distance that I think it's more than 25 miles, no more than 25 miles, I believe, is a distance that the assessment unit is. So again, the 178 classified and unclassified segments resulted in 319 assessment units. So when TCEQ does the integrated report, they will group all of the stations along this entire reach here together in order to conduct the statistics that they use for the integrated report. Okay, so high-level review. Overall, there was a total of 301 concerns or impairments identified in 156 assessment units in the basin. So in each use category, a majority of the assessment units were supporting the designated uses as shown by the green portion. So everything in green is fully supporting or no concern. Recreation and general uses here and here had the most findings of concerns, which are shown in orange, or impairments, which are shown in red, and then followed by fish consumption and aquatic life uses. The gray sections here represent assessment units that were either not assessed because there were no data available for them in that period of record for this assessment, or because the standards don't apply to them. So for example, here under public water supply, not every water body in our basin is designated for public water supply use. Okay, so moving on to the aquatic life use, there were 23 findings for low dissolved oxygen, 1 impairment for cadmium, and a total of 8 findings for impaired habitat fish or benthic macroinvertebrate communities. All right, general uses. This is a pretty wide category. It includes things like nutrients, chlorophyll, pH, solids, various things. So there was a total of 82 concerns identified for chlorophyll A, ammonia, nitrate, and total phosphorus. And these are screened against the nutrient screening levels. So this group right here represents all of the streams in our basin and the 7 classified reservoirs that are assessed against nutrient screening levels. Okay, so that's why it doesn't go out to 319 over here. These 2 groups right here represent the nutrient reservoir criteria, either numeric or narrative. So there's 4 classified reservoirs in our basin that have EPA approved numeric nutrient criteria, and that resulted in 6 assessment units that had impairments. Ryan's going to go over all of this in a little more detail in our next talk, because these impairments for the numeric criteria can result in either a 5C or a 5N impairment category. So the remaining 11 classified reservoirs did not have EPA approved numeric nutrient criteria. And so they are assessed against a narrative criteria. And then all of those AUs had no concerns. And then moving on, we had 12, I didn't put pH on this graph, I'm sorry. So we had 12 impairments for high pH, chloride, or total dissolved solids. And then we had 1 AU that had a concern for a fish kill report. And I believe that's one of the small off-channel reservoirs in our southern portion of the basin. All right. Contact recreation use, this had 75 assessment units that had either concerns or impairments for E. coli or Enterococcus. So E. coli is the bacteria used to assess freshwaters, and Enterococcus is used in salty or tidal waters. All right, now all water bodies that were designated for public water supply use were fully supporting that use. And then the last one here, fish consumption use. So there were 42 AUs with impairments for PCBs in fish tissue, and 41 of these AUs also had impairments for dioxins in fish tissue. There were 8 AUs with impairments for dieldrin in fish tissue, and then 2 AUs with concerns for arsenic in water, and 1 with an impairment for mercury in water. And so the fish tissue or fish consumption use is a little bit different assessment-wise, because all of that data and those consumption advisories or bans are listed by the Texas Department of State Health Services. So all of that data is collected, processed, and sent out by them. Okay. So was there any questions on that before Ryan goes on to explain the differences between those 2 impairment categories?
Hello there, everyone. I'm back. Second talk of the day. So before I came to TRA, I used to be on the TCEQ Water Quality Standards team, and I was the state nutrient coordinator for just over 2 years. So that's kind of the background of why I'm helping explain 5N, 5C, because I was part of the team that developed it. So it's just a talk that I've given in various levels to multiple river authorities already throughout the state. So I just wanted to bring that to the Trinity, because we've been getting questions from various of our CRP partners about the 5N and 5C impairments and how they're similar or different. So before we go into the actual impairment categories, first off, just wanted to give a little bit of background for reservoir numeric nutrient criteria in the state. Within the state of Texas, a handful of reservoirs are the only ones to have numeric nutrient criteria. Other water bodies are assessed either with narrative nutrient criteria or screening thresholds. So going all the way back to 1998, I don't want to age anyone in this group, but that was I was 2 at that time. So EPA National Nutrient Strategy came out. It was pretty much a recommendation to all the states of, hey, we're coming up with recommended numeric nutrient criteria for your state, for reservoirs, for lakes and streams, and other water bodies. You can either follow our recommended criterion, or we're allowing you to develop local scientifically relevant nutrient criteria that you think better fits your state, basins, whatever. In 2001, the pre-TCEQ, it was named TNRCC, Texas Natural Resources Conservation Commission. They went out, said, okay, we're going to develop something scientifically relevant. So they started a nutrient criteria development plan and a working group around that plan. In 2001, the first plan was published. Since then, it has been revised 3 other times in 04, 06, and 2014. And in that plan, they said, hey, we're going to address reservoirs first off, because that's what we deemed the highest priority within the state of Texas at the time. So between 2001 and 2009, they started an evaluation and development of reservoir numeric nutrient criteria using various methods. Some of those methods that they looked at were trying to base criteria directly on concentrations of nutrients, others as indicators, looking for translators in there, or trying to relay other water quality, watershed protection metrics to nutrients. What ended up happening was by 2010, they proposed standalone chlorophyll A criterion for 75 reservoirs throughout the state. Those reservoirs were chosen because they were considered major reservoirs within the state that also had a significant data set of historical data to base these criteria development off of. They used one site, usually mid-reservoir near dam. I have a little asterisk there because there are a handful of reservoirs where they had to combine data from multiple sites, just multiple partners were sampling it, or sampling got handed off and it went to a different station on the reservoir, or a new station was added. So there were some composite station reservoirs that were used to develop this criterion. And these chlorophyll A criterion ranged from 5 to 55.8 micrograms per liter across the 75 reservoirs. They would not go any lower than 5. Some of the modeling they did suggested a criterion lower than 5, but 5 was the cutoff. So these standards were proposed in the 2010 revision of the Texas Surface Water Quality Standards, 30 TAC, Chapter 307.10, and they were found in Appendix F, site-specific nutrient criteria for selected reservoirs. So with all Texas water quality standards, they have to be EPA approved before they're used in Clean Water Act activities, including like the integrated report. So because of that, it took EPA just over 3 years to come back with a decision. So in July 2nd, 2013, EPA came back to the TCEQ and said, hey, we're going to approve criteria for 39 of these reservoirs, but we're going to disapprove criteria for 36 of the reservoirs. So just over half they got approved. Some of the reasons for disapproval, which EPA provided a large technical memo that you can still find on the TCEQ website, were reservoirs categorized as hypereutrophic. They didn't feel comfortable making criteria for a reservoir that was already considered hypereutrophic. If 10% or more of the historical data points were greater than 30 micrograms per liter, then that was cause for disapproval of the criterion. And then they also did various regression lines, and they were looking at various trends. So one, if there was a microgram per liter year increase in nutrient concerns from historical data, looking at trends moving forward, they said, hey, we don't feel comfortable with this, and then greater than 0.2 micrograms per liter a year increase in chlorophyll A. So those 36 disapproved reservoirs were removed then in the 2014 revision, so that left you with the 39. Looking at Trinity River Basin reservoirs that were part of that 39 that now have numeric nutrient criteria for chlorophyll A, there are 4 of them. So segment number 0811, Bridgeport Reservoir, 0813, Houston County Lake, 0816, Lake Waxahachie, and 0817, Navarro Mills Lake. So those were part of the 39 that got approved. Part of the 36 that got disapproved, you can see here, a lot of the major reservoirs within the DFW Metroplex area. But with these reservoirs, they now go via the narrative nutrient criteria throughout the state, which is something that you can find on TCEQ's SWCM website. I just won't be covering the narrative side in depth today. So along with getting the numeric nutrient criteria approved in 2013, EPA did ask for a weight of evidence approach to assess these water bodies. So it was first used in the 2016 integrated report. So how it goes is you have your median chlorophyll A criteria exceeded. So this is where that numeric nutrient criteria value comes in. If it is not exceeded, then the water body was considered fully supporting. If it was exceeded, then you came down to various causal parameters to be reviewed, and those were total nitrogen and total phosphorus with a threshold that was determined by the TCEQ. And then after that, they looked at impact parameters of both SECI and dissolved oxygen. And that resulted in usually concerned non-near-attainment or not supporting if there were issues, but that only resulted in a 5C listing, so pretty much just continue monitoring before we're going to then determine a management strategy. So EPA was okay with this for the first few years as they were seeing how our reservoir nutrient criteria worked out, and then they came back and said, hey, we'd like you to get a little bit more stringent and figure out a better way to categorize these reservoirs where we're starting to see nutrient issues besides for just continued monitoring. So that led to the development of Category 5N in 2021-2022 timeframe. So it was first used in the 2022 integrated report, and it was established to focus management actions that address nutrients in reservoirs with the numeric nutrient criteria. So 5N category can only right now in the state be assigned to reservoirs with numeric nutrient criteria. But in future, as more numeric criteria is developed, if that is by the TCEQ, this category could be assigned for those. So 5N, it's assigned when a water body does not meet its applicable chlorophyll A criterion, but additional study is needed to verify whether exceedance is associated with causal, nutrient parameters, or impacts to response variables. So we still have an increased monitoring in there, but it is more of a targeted study. It's a prioritized study of, hey, this thing is 5N, there's something related to nutrients. We need to prioritize this water body, and that satisfied EPA. So now we get into the difference between, hey, it's nutrient issue, potentially, we need to prioritize it compared to just continuing monitoring before we make a determination. So here's the difference between definitions. You can see not just the difference in text size, but it is a little bit more in depth, 5N to 5C. Now, actions are where you start to see a difference. First off, you do see no additional permitted loading will be permitted for that water body. So if it is either 5N or 5C, no new permits in there, only existing ones. Then the TCEQ or other agencies, if they decide to work with river authorities or work with other entities throughout the state, for 5N, they will conduct a site-specific nutrient evaluation. So you're looking for potential sources of nutrients, both within the water body, within the watershed also, and you're also looking to characterize the watershed with that special study. Compare that to 5C, which is pretty much, hey, just continue what we're doing, maybe add an additional site within the water body or add some additional parameters to help us understand this. Back here to 5N, like I said, we prioritize that now. That is why it's so much focus. So various reassignments can happen after. This is a slide if you want to come back and look at these, but pretty much after a 5N study, if we realize that, hey, this is the standard, it can be removed from Category 5. If it can potentially lead to a watershed protection plan, TMDL, or something else, it'll get moved to Category 5C, continue monitoring, or 5A, where it'll be a TMDL scheduled, or it can be moved up to Category 4C if we find out that the impairment's not due to a potential pollutant. 5C, on the other hand, pretty much if it's identified, move to 5A. If it's not identified as a pollutant, move to 4C, or move to Category 1, no impairment, just based off that continued monitoring. So that resulted, though, in a revised weight of evidence approach. So before, where we had concern non-near attainment, not supporting, fully supporting, now anything with reservoir numeric nutrient criteria within the state of Texas can fall into one of three categories: either fully supporting here, not supporting, which is our Category 5N, so we think there's a nutrient issue and we follow those actions, or Category 5C, not supporting and continue monitoring. So it's going to be a Category 5 water body if you have that issue with the chlorophyll A numeric nutrient criteria being exceeded. So how's assessment conducted? Like Angela said before, previous 7-year period, they take the station listed in Appendix F of the Surface Water Quality Standards. So all those stations are listed in there. Once again, there are a couple that are composited, and they're looking at the mean parameters evaluated for chlorophyll A, TN, TP, SECI, and then for dissolved oxygen concerns or impairments within that water body. So now just a few examples using some of the water bodies that have the numeric nutrient criteria throughout the Trinity Basin. So first off is Lake Waxahachie, where we're here with station 10980, right there near the dam. So Lake Waxahachie, we have up here the parameter, the criteria / threshold that the TCEQ uses for this weight of evidence. And then here was the median. This is all based off the draft 2024 integrated report. So going right to the start is median chlorophyll A criterion exceeded within Lake Waxahachie. Well, the criterion is 19.77. The median's 14, so it's below that. So we're good. No issues. It goes nice, easy, fully supporting. No issues there in Lake Waxahachie. So now moving forward to Lake Bridgeport. Station here, 10970, once again, right near the dam. For Lake Bridgeport, is the criterion exceeded right off the bat for chlorophyll A? Well, criterion threshold's 5.23. Median is 5.34. So yep, it is exceeded. So we move on down here to then our causal parameters. Does TN or TP exceed the threshold for TN? So 0.8, median is 0.555. For TP, criterion is 0.06, median 0.02335. So both of those are good. The median's below the threshold. So it comes down here to then looking at potential impacts. So the big thing with this weight of evidence approach is if you don't see the causal impacts, you have to have both response impacts in there. So both SECI and DO. Well, for Bridgeport, we have neither of those. They both meet the criterion or the threshold needed. So it comes down here, that meets it, no issue. It goes into 5C. So for right now, it's just, hey, yeah, we have a little bit of issue with the chlorophyll A, but we really don't know. So we're just going to leave that as continue monitoring. If we start to see any of these other 4 parameters have issues, it'll probably be flipped into category 5N, and then they'll address that appropriately. So good thing for the Trinity River Basin, we have no 5N reservoirs right now. So I actually had to go outside the Trinity Basin to Lake Cypress Spring, which was one of the first ones to get listed as 5N throughout the state, just to use as an example. So once again, station here right near the dam. Looking at Lake Cypress Spring, chlorophyll A, well, the criterion is exceeded. So comes down here. TN and TP, well, for this, both of them. So the or doesn't even matter. They're both being exceeded. So moves over here, and then we're at SECI or DO. Well, DO is fine. No concern for DO, but SECI fails. So that's what moved over into category 5N. And that leads to, like I mentioned before, the 5N actions. So no permitted additional loading, site-specific study, which has been done on that water body. It's currently should be nearing the end here right now. And then various coordination and prioritization for both monitoring and future assessment. So all that leads to, how do I basically remember the difference between 5C and 5N? Well, 5C, big C here for chlorophyll. Chlorophyll A usually is the only problem when we're going down with all our weight of evidence approach. Yes, you can have maybe a TN, maybe a TP and still get to 5C, but really looking at it, chlorophyll A is the only problem parameter. For 5N, I think of it as a math problem. So you have chlorophyll A plus an additional parameter in there, or 2, or 3, whatever. So chlorophyll A is the problem, plus something else related to nutrients. That's our TN, our TP, our DO, or our SECI. So with that, any questions about 5N and 5C?
Thank you, Ryan. I'll pass on any questions that show up. Looks like we're doing really good on time. We are in our last presentation now, so I am going to be giving a quick overview of the 24 Basin Highlights Report draft. This report was made available on our website at the link here, the bit.ly link, or you can find it just by going to our website, go to Basin Planning Reports and Basin Summary and Highlights Report, and it'll be, I believe it's the top one on that list. So the comment period for this report is going to close on May 1st, and we'll submit the final draft to TCEQ by Wednesday, May 15th. Afterwards, the final version of this report is going to be posted on the website at the same location. It'll just, the draft is going to go away, final will show up. So if you have any questions or comments, just please email them to me. And Brandon Swain says, great explanation, Ryan. So yeah, email me any of your concerns, and my address will be at the end of this presentation. So each year, the format of the Basin Highlights reports changes a little bit. So the format for this year's report is what's called a Watershed characterization report. So it's kind of a bulleted outline of descriptions of the segments, and all of these different categories here. So basically we're highlighting, in this year's report, we're highlighting the basins that had impairments or concerns for aquatic life use and general uses. So it's going to talk about just those segments that are impaired or concerned, the potential causes for those issues, and recommendations for improving water quality. So this follows up on the 2022 Watershed Characterization Highlights Report, which covered fish consumption use impairments and recreation use impairments. So the two together should cover the entirety of, I believe I was working on the 2022 Basin Highlights Report because the draft, or 2022 Integrated Report, because the draft 24 report just came out. So a little while ago, we were talking in terms of assessment units, but moving forward from here, I'm just going to be talking about the segments because that's the way that the report is laid out. So for the aquatic life uses, there were 25 segments that had impairments or concerns. 23 of those segments had concerns or had issues with low dissolved oxygen, and most of these were likely due to things like low flows, high water temperatures, potentially algal populations, or a combination of these causes. All water quality issues can be very interconnected and a little bit nebulous sometimes. Sometimes something very obvious will pop out to you. Low dissolved oxygen in one of the segments may have potentially been due to the salinity in the tidal portion of that stream, and another segment had some markers that made it seem like failing wastewater infrastructure might have been impacting dissolved oxygen in that segment. Let's see, going on to the impaired fish community and macrobenthic community findings in one of the segments may have been due to an upstream discharger. This is down in the Middle Basin. It was downstream of the Sanderson Farms chicken processing facility. So they have an on-site wastewater treatment facility there. Another one of the low benthic macroinvertebrate scores may have been due to sample collection late in the season. So we might have been collecting our benthics after they had emerged into their aerial phase. So we weren't seeing them in their aquatic phases anymore. And then the last segment that had a low benthic macroinvertebrate score and low habitat score may have been due to the sampled reach being in a portion of the stream that wasn't really representative of the conditions of the entire stream. So we went back and redid that reach in a more representative portion of the stream, and that should be showing up potentially in the next integrated report. Those scores will be included. All right. And for the general uses, there were 43 segments that had impairments or concerns. 23 were chlorophyll A issues due to one or more of the following causes, things like drought, low flows, long residence time. So if the water is sitting or moving slowly through a reach or sitting in a pool, that gives the algal populations plenty of time to make use of the light availability, if the stream is not shaded, any available nutrients in that stream. It'll just give them the opportunity to grow and increase their populations to a point where the chlorophyll A has increased, where it's problematic. Also, nutrients. Some of these we have seen, we couldn't find anything in the portion of the stream itself that indicated why chlorophyll A was high, so we assumed that it was coming in from upstream. So for example, if a site's immediately downstream from a reservoir, you may have higher populations being washed in to the stream below the dam. Other things like channel conditions, so things that are streams that are wide, very clear, no shading, will contribute to algal growth. And then we also had a couple we just didn't know what was causing it. And the recommendation for that is obviously to go collect some more data. We also had 12 segments that had total phosphorus concerns and 18 segments that had nitrate concerns. Now, most of these were due to wastewater treatment facility effluent from upstream plants. This is very common in streams that are effluent dominated, especially, many of the larger streams in our basin are effluent dominated, especially in the summer. So what you're going to see is high nutrient levels at low flows, because the flow that's in the stream is a majority effluent from the plant. Very little native flow to dilute that. When you get rain events or just higher seasonal flows, that'll dilute the total phosphorus and nitrate in the streams. One of the ammonia findings that we had here was due to a wastewater pipeline break. So it was a long-term pipeline break. We identified it, fixed it, everything is fine now. Eventually that concern may fall off the list as more recent data, and the time and how the assessment process is forward every 2 years. So that data will eventually fall out of the data batch that's being used. 2 segments had a numeric nutrient finding, and one had a narrative nutrient criteria finding. And those probably due to, for the numeric, might have been due to high algal populations by itself. Another one might have been related to some nutrients running off, not necessarily from a wastewater treatment facility, but from fertilizers being used that were contributing to that. And then the narrative criteria finding we thought might have been due to some long residence times due to low flows. The fish kill report, that happened many years ago. It's still showing up in the data, but that had been reported to be due to low dissolved oxygen due to high algal growth, which might have been related to nutrient availability in that reservoir. What I was saying, how everything is a little bit nebulous and related. Then the findings for where there was one finding each for total dissolved solids, chloride, and sulfate. These were likely due to drought conditions. So when you have less flow coming in through rain or through springs or aquifers that are filling in or flowing into the stream, you'll get evaporation and that'll cause concentration of these parameters in the water that remains. So we think all of those were related to drought conditions. And then we had one pH finding that might have been due to algal populations, and the other one that we just don't know, but there is current monitoring. We're doing current monitoring in that particular segment to figure out what might have caused that pH finding. All right, so does anybody have any questions? We have reached the end of our presentation for today. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away. All right, thanks everybody.